What we're going to talk about today are really some basics. A couple of years ago, I was talking to a prospect who's now a client of mine, and he said, Julie, here's our problem. I've got this big pipeline. We have so much opportunity, we don't know what to do with it. And we're trying to figure out what resources to put into which opportunities, and nothing is moving. Many of our prospects have gone radio silent. We have sent out proposals. We have done demos, and nothing is moving. And what do I do? He was in a panic mode. What do I do? So we kind of started to backtrack and look at the efficacy of the entire sales process that they had, from filling the pipeline with good real opportunities to effectively working those opportunities to figure out which ones were winnable and close those, and figure out, just as importantly, which ones were not winnable. How do you separate the shoppers from the buyers? So I'm going to share with you today some of the things that I went through this specific sales leader with years ago. And I think many of these tips and tools and that we're going to talk about will apply to some of you. Where are the breakdowns in your process? Where is the breakdown in the quality of the pipeline? Is the forecast real? And how can we assess and reassess and assess and reassess that all along? So here's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about specifically, how do we even start to identify some of these high potential opportunities? I talked to some sales reps, and they identify high potential opportunities by identifying a large company that they're not doing business with, which is the beginning of identifying who you want to prospect to, but it's certainly not the end of that process. We're going to talk about some techniques to mitigate that inaccurate forecast. How do we identify and make those commitments to our management, have the credibility that we have a handle on the business in our pipeline to accurately forecast and predict when this business will actually close? We're going to talk about our formula for qualifying prospect. It's a multi-dimensional approach. It's not one and done. It is not, unfortunately, just finding the person who owns the budget. Just because they can spend the money does not mean they will spend the money. So we're going to talk about that formula and how you can apply it to your pipeline to identify gaps and identify where that additional work needs to be done. And then we're going to talk about the keys to exceptionally high close rates. And as crazy as it sounds, it is pretty basic. And everything I'm going to talk about today, I think, is an extremely common sense approach to pipeline and opportunity management. However, the reality is that common sense is not always common practice. And we often find ourselves cutting corners or taking shortcuts. And as a matter of fact, if you've got really, really good relationships with some of your prospects, maybe they've bought from you in the past, a trap many of us fall into is not going through the rigor of this process and the qualification and making assumptions that because they've done it before, they'll do it again. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. So let's just kind of at a high level set the stage. If we want to blow out our quotas and deliver exceptional results, there's some basic things that we have to do. And this is kind of a visual of a funnel. So whether you look at a funnel or you look at a pipeline, lay your funnel down on its side and call it a pipeline, either one of these analogies can work. And there's some things that we need to do. So we need to look at the universe, identify those suspects, and really think about who can we speak to in order to create opportunities. Who has got issues and problems that can best be resolved by the services, solutions, or products that I offer? And our ideal in that world is to go talk to them and create opportunities, stimulate some interest, and create some need and have some conversations that begin to help them explore the efficacy of what we have to offer. And once we create those opportunities, we want to move them through our process from, loosening status quo to helping them evaluate alternatives to helping them assess our ability to meet their needs, and ultimately through the decision and procurement processes. So all of us work for companies that have probably identified some of the steps that we would go through to do that, based on best practices, based on history, based on results in the past. And if we understand that, we can start to look at, are we doing the right activities at every step of the way to make sure that we're closing more of those opportunities than we are not. So at some point through all of that sales process, we're making judgments and assessments based on fact and based on insight from the prospects that we're dealing with to understand, are they real? And the analogy again that I like to use from that is, are we able to separate the shoppers from the buyers? The shoppers can drain us of time and resource. And unfortunately, those shoppers are typically the opportunities that end in no decisions and kill our productivity, because shoppers are available. Shoppers are willing to spend time with you. Shoppers are willing to learn more and take maybe advantage of you, but certainly leverage your ability to bring resources to them. It's the buyers, the people that are really going to ultimately make a decision and do something differently that we want to identify. So what does that mean? Well, value selling, we have kind of a bifurcated approach to how we help our clients do that. Our program called Vortex Prospecting is all about how to create new opportunities, how to develop the cadence, and how to develop the talk tracks, and how to develop the messaging to get in the door when people are ready to buy. And what we do in that Vortex Prospecting is teach people how to kind of combat the perception that people don't want to be sold. People don't want to be sold, yet people do want to buy when they have a need that they recognize and it's important enough for them to deal with. So rather than focus on what we want to sell them, we want to focus on what value we can add to them. And we're going to talk a bit more detail about that, but one of the first concepts that we teach in our Vortex Prospecting is, do you even know how many prospects you need to have and the activity that is required to generate that? So this is an opportunity to take this kind of spreadsheet and start to back into what is the activity and what is the number and volume of prospects that you need to have in order to generate the results that you want to generate. Once I know that, I can start to identify how much time, effort, and how big my net has to be to cast that. So this is a great exercise as you're sitting here in the middle of August, focused on what needs to happen by the end of the year. Some of you are on a calendar year. Some of you are not on a calendar year. You may even have less time. I know we have clients whose fiscal years end in October and November, and some that end in February and March. So as you look at your period to deliver the revenue, because let's face it, in sales, we are the revenue manufacturing arm of the businesses that we work for. You can start to do this. So take the target that you have left, your average deal size, and start and just do some simple math. If my average deal size is $125,000 and my quota is $2 million, that means I have to close on average about 16 deals just to hit my target, assuming those deals are all of that average transaction size. Then I can start to look at, hey, what is my win ratio? Once I get a meeting and once I first enter something into the pipeline, on average, about how many of those ultimately end up converting to clients or customers. For some of you, it might be 1 of 3. For some of you, it might be 1 of 5. But you can start to look at some of the data of your past results and calculate that. If you have no idea, I would err on the side of a smaller ratio, 1 of 3 or 1 of 2, than be very optimistic that, 1 of 3 or 1 of 4, as opposed to be very optimistic that I can close 50% of the people that are going to meet with me. Once you identify that, you can say, okay, if I'm closing 1 out of 3, I need to find 48 qualified prospects during this time period. Now I can back in to say, okay, if I need 45 qualified prospects, how many meetings do I need to get? How many meetings turn into qualified opportunities? And you can start to do the math. When we do this exercise with a lot of our clients, we get the deer in the headlights look in the eyes because they are blown away that the number of prospects or the number of meetings or the number of qualified opportunities that have to be created are almost always much more than they initially understood. So this is the baseline. I don't know if I can hit my target if I don't even know what my target is. So the first key to getting your productivity and driving this is to get really clear on what those numbers need to be. And if I need to get 240 new prospects into the pipeline, new initial meetings, however I define that to be successful, I can start to say I can start to do the math. If I need 240 between now and the end of the year, that means I need 40 new opportunities per month between now and the end of the year. And if I need 40 per month, I need, 10 per week. And what am I doing to do that? So this is all starts to play into understanding the goals so that I can back into the activities. Once I understand that, I can start to manage my calendar more effectively. My experience has been that, let's face it, prospecting, pure prospecting, however you're doing it, whether it's social, whether it is direct call, which, oh, by the way, if you're not picking up the phone and calling, you should be, whether it's email, whether it's LinkedIn, social selling, however you are outreaching to them, you need to understand the amount of time that it takes to do that and get that calendared on your calendar. So here is a master time allocation that we provide to our clients. And actually, you'll be able to download this template so that you can understand where you should be spending your time. So the first thing that we do, again, is understanding some of those goals. We can start to create this master time allocation. So if I know that 50% of my time needs to be focused on prospecting and acquiring new customers, I can now start to block on my calendar the amount, those time frames that I am dedicated to do that. Those might be dedicated times for call blocks. I'm going to power the phones from 10 to 12 every day this week, or 10 to 11, or 1 to 3. And I'm going to partner with my buddy in the cubicle next to me or down the hall, and we're going to have a contest and see who gets more connects and who gets more meetings. For many of you, I also understand that you have retention and upsell goals as well. So if you are also managing a base, we want to make sure we're spending time on that. And the reality is that as employees, we all have some internal administration stuff that we need to do. Ideally, we want to minimize that or do that in time frames where in non-selling hours. So I don't want to be doing my expense reports or my paperwork internally that's not going to help me further a deal during the middle of the day when I could be talking to people who are also at work that might be willing to talk to me. So I can start to build this master time allocation. This is a very powerful tool, and it'd be interesting. One of the things I would suggest you do is look back at your last month. Where did you spend your time? Are you spending your time? Is your time being managed in a way that will support your goals? And the beautiful thing about having a master time allocation is now you can start to make trade-offs. So if I know that life is going to get in the way and my plan is from 10 to 12 today, I am uninterrupted, unapologetically interrupted, going to power the phones to build my pipeline. And my manager comes in and says, here's something I need from you today, or a customer has a urgent issue that needs to be addressed, and something gets in the way of that, because life happens. We can't control everything. I want to make sure that I don't just cancel that call back, that I move it and trade time off with something else on my calendar. So if I have to pull an internal admin in, or I need to pull in a existing customer service type issue into this time block, I am going to move that on my calendar. I am not going to delete it. And it's the ability to commit to the clarity of your master time allocation that ultimately helps you drive those long-term sustainable results. So let's get back now into some of this messaging that we talked about. I said it's not about you, it's about them. So we want to deliver messages, whether it's our voicemail messages that we're leaving them, whether it is in the emails that we're leaving them, or whether we get lucky and they actually answer the phone. I was talking with a new sales rep yesterday who started to power the phones, and as he was building his pipeline, and he didn't think anybody was going to answer the call. Maybe some of you have been in that situation. So he was just waiting for the, beep and to leave his message, and the phone actually was picked up, and then kind of the stammering and the stuttering started because he wasn't prepared to actually have a conversation. But we want to focus on our messaging and do what we call a value-based interruption. What's a value-based interruption? It means that we are adding value to that individual. In today's prospecting world, we need to use content and insight to gain their attention and add value to them. We want to be interesting to them if we expect them to be interested in us. So our messages can't be about how great our products are. It can't be about how super duper our company is. It cannot be about us. It has to be about them. And there's all kinds of information that I'm sure you have at your fingertips. There's industry information. I'm sure that your company has information. We call it creating your sphere of influence, of understanding all of this content and authoritative insight that you can use to establish your credibility for them to be willing and interested to spend some time with you and learn something. So that is one of the key techniques that we think about. Look at your messages today. Look at your emails today. Is it about you or is it about them? If it's about you, you're probably getting deleted pretty quickly. If it's about them, you increase the likelihood that they're going to be willing to learn more and do that. And understand that with you, that you can have that conversation with them. So here's a couple of examples of some things that you might also want to share. And we call these our credibility introductions or our value-based stories. But rather than talk about your product again, talk about a success story that you have with a client that might be similar. So when I work with clients, we create a whole arsenal of what we call these value-based stories that can be used in credibility introductions. They can be used in voicemails. They can be used in an initial phone call. They can be used to open a call with someone who might not know who you are or what you do. They can be used in emails or in mails. But the bottom line is they don't tell anybody what your product or service or solution is. They tell people the problems you solved and the results that you delivered. So I want to deliver these stories in a way that are impactful and intriguing. And again, not about me, but about them and how we might be able to solve similar problems. So another key thing that we teach when we're trying to create the hook. Remember, our objective in outreach, in prospecting, is to be intriguing, that they are willing to learn more. I am willing to take that meeting and learn a little bit more. And just like nobody's intriguing when you first meet them and they go on and on and on about how great they are, the same is true of salespeople. No buyer or executive or manager or someone that you're targeting wants you to get them on the phone and just start talking at them. It's not about pitch, it's about engage. It's not about you, it's about them. And it's not even always about are they ready to buy today, but can you get enough information and stay top of mind for when they are ready to buy? So thinking that through is really important. Once we do that, we can start to think about, okay, where are our high potential opportunities? Where have we been successful in the past, and who should we be targeting? There's the old silly story, but it's still relevant, of a sales rep who had gone to work for a company that sold elevators. Let's call it Otis Elevator. And he was selling that, and he was getting nowhere. He was not getting any appointments. And he sat down with his manager, and he was so frustrated. He was very demotivated. And his manager started going through his pipeline, and he had identified all the new construction in his territory, and he was going after them. And the manager said to him, "What do you know about this new construction?" And he said, "What do you mean? What do I know about it? I know it's new, and I know it's construction, and I know they're likely, in the process of looking at what they need in the infrastructure, etc. Those should be my targets." And they started to do a little digging in the list, and they realized that almost 75% of the targets that he was going towards were single-story buildings. They were single-story buildings that did not have elevators. So as crazy as that sounds, he was calling on people that would never, ever have a need for his services. So are we calling on the right people? Have we identified the industries, the roles that we have had success with in the past, and that we can potentially replicate that success in the future? Are we leveraging our referrals? We all know that the number one way to get a meeting with anyone is to be introduced to that individual. I will take meetings with people that I will maybe never do business with, given the nature of my business. But if someone that I trust, either within my organization or a client or a supplier or in my network, asks me to meet with someone, I will. And I think that is true of a lot of the executives and people that we are trying to get in front of as well. So who do they know that they trust and respect that you can also have that referral? So let's now then talk about the next stage. We've found them. We're getting these appointments. We're using our authority and our content to create interest and intrigue. We're not talking about us. We're talking about them. Now we've got to start to move them through the sales process, which really means we need to move them through their buying process. And we need to understand their buying process if we need to move them through that. So if you think about what our sales process is in today's automated world, it is basically a set of milestones that says, if I have done this series of activities and gotten this far in conversations and done these things, I should be 50% of the way there or 60% of the way there. So the analogy that I was taught years ago was think of those milestones as the yards on an American football field. Am I at the 50-yard line or am I in the 10-yard line ready to go into the end zone? And that's what the sales process is. In an ideal world, your sales process mirrors the aggregate of your buyer's buying process. Now, no two companies are exactly the same, so we need to have some flexibility in there. But at the end of the day, selling is facilitating buying. And when we facilitate buying, we are more effective than if we are pushing a sales process on someone as opposed to facilitating their buying process. So we'll talk about what that means. Well, if we want to understand their buying process, we need to ask lots of questions. And those of you who have been around me or value selling for any period of time know that the foundation of what we teach is a questioning cadence. Because we're not pushing anything on our prospects. We are helping them get the results that they seek by partnering with us, whether that's buying our products, our services, our solutions, whatever it is you call that you're going to trade for their money and is part of your responsibility for your company to sell. So what do we need to do? We need to know them. We need to know everything about them. But we also need to know about how things work within their company. How are they going to make those decisions? What are we trying to accomplish? And we want to solve their problems, but we more importantly want to understand if those problems are worth solving. When we are perceived as pushy, it's because we have our agenda and we are not focused on what that prospect wants or needs. And that is a big part of understanding this buying process here. So at Value Selling, we have kind of created this buying process that has held up in a multitude of industries in a business-to-business value-added type procurement for a client. And I'm going to walk you through this right now, but we often call this the CFO talk track. So imagine that you are recommending that you're going to buy from you. Put yourself in your prospect's shoes and recommending that you're going to buy from you. At some point, at some place, you are probably going to have to justify that purchase. And you're going to have to justify it either to the CFO or to your boss or to the purchasing agent that's going to go and execute on that purchase. I don't know, but it's somebody you probably have to go through that. And the first thing that is going to happen if you come into my office and say, Julie, I want to buy this, I'm going to say, oh, interesting. What is that? What is that? Tell me about that solution. And why do we need that? What are the problems and what's going on in the business that's creating that need? Are we growing? Are we expanding? Are we trying to improve efficiency? Are we trying to drive costs out of this business? Are we trying to expand into new markets? So why do you think we need this? And then, just as important, if this is what you've decided you buy, who else did you look at? Why is this the best alternative? What does this do for us that no one else can do for that? And why is it worth it? And that gets into the whole value conversation. If you're asking me to spend any amount of money, $100,000 on this solution, what is the return on that? Are we going to get cost savings? Are we going to get incremental productivity? Are we going to improve efficiencies? Are we going to see a bump in revenue as a result of that? What is the value? Have you thought about that? And is that value enough to justify that purchase? Who's been involved in this? Who other than you has been involved in this decision? Has it been vetted? Do you have the buy-in from the maybe other disciplines or other business units or other people that will be impacted in that? Has everybody agreed that this is the right thing to do? And last but not least, what is our plan to implement and deliver results? This is going to play very tightly into this whole concept of forecast accuracy, which we're going to move into shortly. But the whole point of building a plan with a prospect is not to build a plan to buy. It's to build a plan to realize the value. So we use this buying process to really understand with the prospect what is everything that has to happen for you to get the results you think you can get by doing business with me. And now let's focus on the results, not just the purchase. What does all this mean? We call it keeping our solution in our pocket. We're not pitching. Yes, at some point we have to describe what we do. Yes, at some point we have to educate our prospects on what our solution is and how it fits. Yes, we need to do that, but we want to do that and tailor that to everything that we know about the prospect. So a few weeks ago, I was working with one of my colleagues, and we are going to be bringing value selling into their organization. And they are an organization in kind of a very interesting niche industry in the automotive market space. And they have about 15 people in their organization that they're going to introduce value selling to. Not one of those individuals has a title of a sales professional. Not one of those individuals thinks of themselves as a sales professional, even though they're responsible for generating revenue for their company. They think of themselves as service specialists, as industry specialists, as kind of engineers, very technical type identification in their roles. So when we ultimately were selling to them, we had to completely change our language so that we were relevant to that individual. Now, that's kind of a very extreme example, but it is true every time you're selling to someone. You need to understand the nomenclature and the vernacular that your prospects have so that you can present and contextually connect to their world. And we do that by keeping our solution in our pocket and not talking about it too soon and not giving them a reason to not select us early on in the process. So now we've talked about finding them, we've talked about advancing them, and now we can start to talk about how we're going to close them and make sure they're qualified. And I talked a little bit about qualification at the beginning, but at the end of the day, our research today shows, and this is backed up by CSO Insights, and the date on that study is not correct, so I apologize for that, but roughly 55% of forecasted deals do not close in the initial time frame that they are forecast. That's outrageous. If when you really start to think about it, if we cannot get better than 55% at forecasting, why are we doing it in the first place? But we're doing it because we're told we have to do it, and people are making decisions based on our forecasts, and they are important. So what happens? Well, we've gone back in and done a big postmortem with a number of our clients, and we find that definitely there's about 5 key buckets that when deals don't close that tend to be the areas that have either been missed by a sales rep or something has changed. The first one is lack of value. Yeah, it looks interesting, not worth it to me. The second one is lack of differentiation. Yeah, you're pricey. I don't want to buy the most expensive because I don't see any incremental value or any difference between that. So I'm going to go with the cheaper alternative because you're not differentiated. It's too risky. Maybe I don't think you can deliver what you said you can deliver. Maybe I don't understand what has to happen to actually get those results. Number 4, we're selling to people who can't buy. We're not talking to all of the decision makers. We haven't involved them. We haven't identified them, and therefore we we get blocked, or we find out at the last minute that somebody else has to be involved. And then the fifth one, which is incredibly important, often overlooked, especially for those of us that live and sell some sort of a technical solution into a discipline. And I don't mean technical in that it's got to be very complicated and actually technical. I could be selling human resource software to a human resources professional, but I'm not connecting it to what's going on in the business. I could be selling language learning and talking about curriculum, but I'm not connecting that to the business objectives of those organizations. And if I'm not connected to the business issues, it'll always be virtually impossible to understand and build a business case on the values. So this ends up being kind of a circular pitfall that we can all run into. So how do we eliminate that? Well, value selling, we have the foundation of what we do is called the qualified prospect formula. And I'm going to share it with you here now, but we basically look at this and say, hey, there are multiple dimensions of qualification, and it is important for a sales rep to understand all of those dimensions. And just like I said, our selling process is about replicating or facilitating the buying process. The same is true of a qualified prospect. So we look at this qualified prospect formula from the prospect's point of view. And if I'm going to do business with you, if you pick up the phone and call me and try to sell something to me as the leader here at Value Selling Associates, the first question I need to decide is, should I buy this? Do you have something that would work in my business? Do you have something that I need or want? And if I don't know that I need or want it, can you ask some questions and help me recognize that maybe I've got a blind spot and I do actually need or want that? We call that a differentiated vision match, and that's the connection of our solution to the issues and problems that a prospect recognizes, and in a way that we can do something for them that nobody else can. Once I decide, yeah, I should buy this. Yep, that makes sense. I get it. The next question I probably want to know is it worth it? Do I have $1 million headache and I'm willing to take a $100,000 aspirin? Or do I have a $100,000 headache and you're proposing $1 million aspirin? But at some point, everybody makes that decision, is it worth it? And not only do they make that decision in terms of building the business case, they also make it for themselves. Is it worth it to me? Does this get me as an individual where I need to go in my career? Is this too risky for me? Does this allow me to be a trailblazer in my company? So when we talk about value, we talk about it from really two different components. The value to the individual and what's important to them and what they're motivated by, and the value to the business, the justification and the business case that will be made for that purchase. Can I buy? Do I have the financial fortitude? Do I have the ability? Do I own the budget? Do I have the empowerment? Am I authorized? Can I actually buy that? Remember, we said one of the biggest reasons things don't close is because we're calling on people who can't buy. So do I, as a sales rep, know who needs to be involved? And it's in today's world, it is likely, unless you're calling on very small businesses, it is not a single decision maker. There are more and more people involved in all these in decisions. And the bigger the decision, the bigger the item, the more critical the product or service or solution you sell, the more people involved, the more complicated it gets. So can we do that? And then last but not least, when will they buy, which is a direct correlation to when they need to see the value. When do they need to realize the value? If I've got a problem I need to have solved by December 31st, and it's going to take me 60 days to implement it, you got to believe I'm pretty motivated right now. Because every day that goes by puts my ultimate objective of achieving something by the end of December at risk. But if I don't, as a sales rep, know when they need to have those results by, it's very difficult for me to tap into that sense of urgency. So we want to understand that plan. These 4 dimensions make up the foundation of the value selling framework. And the interesting part about qualification is it's never a one and done thing. Things fall in and out of qualification all the time. Things change. I've been on my way to pick up an order, physically pick up a purchase order that I had been told was sitting on the desk of my buyer, only to find out that that day that buyer was put on a reduction in force and let go. And they called me to let me know that the purchase order, because of that, was going into the shredder. Broke my heart. But if we focus on these things and are very diligent and deliberate in understanding them, we can be much more successful. But this is a process. Things come in and out of qualification all the time. And this is one of my challenges with salespeople often, of once you advance something to in your sales process, often they stay at that stage and just live and live and live until they die. And oftentimes we need to be a little more fluid than that. Things come in and out of qualification all the time for various reasons. Organizations change, industries change, political environments change, things change. And it's important that we understand that the qualification process is not an event, it is a process. So what makes for exceptional qualification? It's thinking about this process. It is constantly requalifying. It is reconfirming when you speak with a prospect. Is what we've been talking about in the past still the case today? And can we confirm that? And one of the risks that salespeople take is that we're either afraid to ask the more difficult questions because, oh my God, if it changed, I don't want to know because then I've got to tell my manager and it's so crazy, or because we think we want it so bad enough we can finesse it through. So we want to be very deliberate in that reconfirming, and we want to be very open and candid with ourselves in terms of what reality is. So qualification is a continuous process. So just like prospecting is continuous, you've got to do it every day, every week, every month, every quarter. So is qualification. You've got to be relooking and revisiting every deal all the time when you get a chance to talk about it and understand what's going on. Things change. Your prospect is only qualified for as long as it is in a static environment. Things change. Shoot, a competitor can come and make a sales call after you and muddy up everything that you thought you had agreed to with that prospect. It happens. We know it happens. So understanding that. So I'm going to kind of wrap up here, but I want to invite you to share any questions you might have. And Jules, if you have any questions that have come in, please, we can start to talk about them. So share any questions. But as we kind of wrap this up, I want to think about a few things and then share with you some things going on here at Value Selling. So first of all, as we kind of wrap this up, prospecting is a continuous activity. And it cannot be eliminated for periods of time, or you will see bumps and ebbs and flows in your revenue. So I know even in our business, it's very easy to get busy when we have a full pipeline and stop prospecting. And then 6 months down the road, we're in trouble. As a matter of fact, I have one of my senior associates who had been extremely busy for a period of time, sent me kind of a tongue-in-cheek email a few weeks ago, and he said, hey, I've been prospecting, and all of a sudden I've got this great pipeline, and it kind of said, weird. I heard prospecting is important, and I'm back at it. So it is important, and we have to do it all the time, or we're going to see gaps in our pipeline. And as a sales manager, that's one of the things I always wanted to focus with my reps on. How many new opportunities are you creating every week? How many new people are you meeting? How many new opportunities are you creating every single week? There's not a single criteria for qualification. Just because they can doesn't mean they will. It's not a matter of just finding the person with the budget anymore. We need to look at this multi-dimensions of qualification and go through that. Identify your goals and calendar your activities. It is so easy to get lost in our day. And I don't know anybody who's sitting around saying, gosh, there's just nothing for me to do today. I wish there was something for me to do. So I'm just going to sit here and hope that the phone rings. It doesn't happen. We need to calendar activities. We've got to be proactive. And we've got to be very effective at thinking about how we can leverage our authority and our resources to focus on our prospects. And qualification is never one and done. It's continuous. We need to be looking at it all the time if we want to drive those good opportunities and improve our close rate. The bad news is that not every buyer, every meeting that we have is going to result in a sale. That's the reality we live with. The worst news is that it takes us months and months and months to figure out which ones aren't going to result in a sale. And the more effective we can be and the more deliberate we can be at creating opportunities and qualifying them, the less the likelihood of us spending a ton of time on someone who's never going to buy exists.